how do we teach our kids to be aware and proactive if they hear or see the potential for violence without making them paranoid or anxious? So here it's a little bit more about how do we talk with them that empowers them to do something, like the point you were just getting at a little bit, Emily. And more specifically, this person is suggesting that they're having a hard time finding the right language to do that for a kindergartner, which, you know, I can understand why, but again, maybe expanding on the ages, how we empower that agency at different ages for kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think it's helpful to think about how our emergency system in our brain works for this question. I think everybody probably has a little bit of exposure to the fight, flight, freeze system that happens when you feel a lot of anxiety or panic. And one of the things that I think is really a reframe on how we think about these, like, you know, I even cringed. I'm like, oh, my kid is doing an active shooter drill. Like, this is, you know, she's hiding in a cupboard as a bear, you know, this is really hard. But I think one of the things that I like to think of from a brain perspective is, okay, look, we're practicing these drills so that they can practice the safety procedures, right? But they're also reducing anxiety in a real emergency because they've seen this scenario before. And when we act in fight, flight, or freeze, it's not always it's never engaging our prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking center, which can help us think rationally and soothe us and be, you know, actually keep us safe in some ways, right? From a higher order thinking. So practicing these drills, and I think part of that question was like, how do you explain what will happen with an intruder? Is if we do talk about it, it gives them an exposure and it sort of reduces the anxiety that might happen in a real emergency so they can act more efficiently, actually, and more safely, to be honest. So I think that I know it's a roundabout way of sort of answering your question, but I think when we think about brain science, it really helps us to say, it really validates practicing some of these things and confronting them. It doesn't make it necessarily more scary, but it does give us practice. Anything we do has practice. And so I think the more regulated we are when we present those to our kindergartner, like, you know, how you hide it makes you really safe, you know, and the next time that happens, you're going to be really good at being really safe. You know, I know you're going to be able to do it because you've done it before, you know, and that actually helps them be more reassured that they have competency in that. I don't know, Sarah, if you have anything to add for that.
No, I love that. And I think I'm thinking too, like, just looking at the question about how do we help them feel like they can be aware and proactive. Again, like for different age groups, proactivity is going to look really different. Like for a little kid, so I think it's like, okay, what's the ratio of control in a situation? For really young kids, it's very little on them and it's very much on us. And that ratio gets more evened out as they get closer to adolescence, right? So for really little kids, our job is to tell them that they just need to look to the grownups, right? The grownups have this. The grown-ups' job is to keep you safe. And so you don't really have to do anything except just listen to what the grownups are telling you to do. And you can do this, right? We're really going to instill confidence in their ability to do this. Remind them that they know how to do this because they practice this and they practice it so that they can be safe. But the onus on them to really do anything is kind of non-existent, other than just listen to your grownups. And then as they get a little bit older, that's going to shift, obviously. So we want them, like, little kids don't need we want them to feel agency, but very little thing, like very tiny things make them have agency, feel like they have agency. Bigger kids need more stuff to feel like they're in control of, to have that sense of agency. And so that's, I think, kind of maybe like a framework to go with. Like, the older your child is, the more you want to reassure them that they have skills to keep themselves safe. And of course, yes, knowing and trusting that the grownups in their lives are doing everything they can to keep them safe, but also, like, you know what you can do. You can report something that doesn't feel safe to you.
follow it. I think circling back to like following the protocols, right? Like really like knowing the grown up to go to at school if you see something that's wrong, or if you see a child upset, right? You know, or if you see somebody being bullied, or if you see something scary, right? So that there's very clear sort of delineation of what you can do, and the kids really know what they can do in those situations is really self-soothing to them, right? Like, I know I can talk to this grown up. And one of the things I think we haven't gotten to yet is what we can direct at children, but we can talk about that next. But I think identifying, you know, people at school that they know who to speak to, you know, if they have a feeling, or they're feeling worried, or they need to cross. Because again, we want to evoke this stop and think, is this an emergency? Let me put this into perspective, you know, for all things, right? For emotions, for actions, you know, so we really want to be able to get that to be like muscle memory for them, that they do it second nature, as opposed to like, you know, more and more second nature, right? Just as us, you know, on Friday, we were a little panicked, but then we got a little muscle memory on how to talk to kids about it. And it became easier, right, over the next few days.
Thank you. Yes, and Leah mentions in the chat, the schools use the term trusted adults with the secondary kids starting in middle school. So, you know, having the conversations, asking them, who are your trusted adults, and do they know who they would go to, is a very much an older kid conversation to have.